Hello, everyone. It's very nice to be here to present the platform Adapta Brasil in this very important forum. First of all, I would like to thank the organization of the Latin American Caribbean Open Science Forum for this opportunity. Also, would like to acknowledge the contribution of the UNESCO through the natural science sector hosted in Brasilia, Brazil, and also the Ministry of Science and Technology to organizing and to supporting our presentation at this forum. So the Adapta Brasil, it's a platform that is being built in partnership with the Ministry of Science and Technology as a support for adaptation measures and actions. It's a platform that looks, as you see the title there, to the climate change impact risks to, in fact, provide information and support for decisions on adaptation and adaptation measures and actions. So the structure, the structure, we have this platform looking, it's being built for a national coverage, which means the whole country. In this national coverage, we have different cuts in terms of geographical situation. We have municipalities or states or biomes. We have several different geographical distribution of the data. The funding comes direct from the federal government. So it supports the development of the platform, but also provide fellowship for young scientists to be involved in the platform. So the platform has a strong involvement of the scientific community in the country. We aim for users looking to public managers at local, state, and national level, as I mentioned in terms of the coverage. But also from the private sector and the civil society in the country. As well, not only this part of the society practitioners and this form, but also the scientific and academic institution. The developers of the platform is the INPE, which is the Instituto Nacional de Pesquisas Espaciais, and the RNP, which stands for Rede Nacional de Ensino e Pesquisa, and Rede Clima is a network in Brazil that supports a lot of the actions that we do. Some of the key partners are listed there. All of these are, most of them are institutions associated to the Brazilian state. But we have an important partner also there as a funding support. So what is the motivation to have this platform? So we know that there's an increased economic impact, and not only economic, but a social impact of extreme events associated to climate change. If we take, which is, it's a list, it's basically a distribution of natural disasters caused by throughout the whole world, and those natural disasters associated to geophysical events, meteorological events, hydrological events, climatological events. So we see a huge distribution of these disasters throughout the globe. And we see here they're called natural disaster, but the natural disasters are being potentialized by climate change. So in these aspects, we need to forecast, we need to evaluate to be able to take actions in terms of preventing, in terms of adapting to those sort of disasters and impacts. So the platform has a strong scientific base on the identification of the risk to society and to the natural environment. So it's a key aspect of the platform. So we try to bring the up-to-date science related to the identification of the risks. But also not only the risk to society, but also the climate variation. This, in our perspective, will allow decision maker, allow decision planning for sustainable or for a less, to reduce the impact of the climate variability. So the platform basic look to the science for solution and the science in terms of action research. A lot of what we have there are the base of the scientific information, put into action, put into solution. And there's a lot of other opportunities that we saw that, not only in terms of planning towards adaptation, but also to other national commitments that Brazil has, and that we certainly see this as a platform that could be potentially used or potentially developed in other countries with the same objective. But in terms of national and international commitments, we look to sustainable development goals, for instance, the conventions, all the commitments associated to the climate convention, to the biodiversity convention, or to the desertification convention. So a lot of these commitments that were made in the past or that were made currently, recently made, they can be users of the information that comes out from a platform like this one. So, so what is the objective of the platform? This platform aims to consolidate, integrate, and disseminate information to support the advances on the analysis of observed and projected climate change. So this is a very important point. So we're looking to a current diagnostics on the change in the climate variables at this point in time, but we look to a projections as well. I'm going to show you in brief. But for the whole Brazilian territory, as I mentioned, and to inform decision makers for planning, adaptation, action, and strategies. So, so that's basically the objective of Adapta Brazil platform. There's another important aspect, another important point is that how we categorize risk throughout time. So where this platform sits in times in terms of doing its projections. So we're not a nowcast real-time platform. So we do use current information, but we're not a real-time platform. We are not a week based platform. So we're looking more towards years and decades. So we're looking to this diagnostics, bring information that can allow the decision maker to provide or to take decision at this time frame of years, a time frame for decades. So looking to a path for a sustainable future. So that's the perspective, or at least a path to reduce the risks associated to the climate variation. And how we define risks. So what are the scientific, as I mentioned, basis to define risk itself, where that came from in our perspective, and in several aspects in a global perspective. So we're looking a lot to the big assessments done by IPCC. So the knowledge, understanding of risk for IPCC itself moved from what we call assessment report 4. If we see this little figure here to the left, we have assessment report 4, which had a certain perspective in terms of risk, and that has moved a little bit to incorporate a lot of a question related to the vulnerability of the system already on the state of the system. So the environmental stresses are the hazard. the exposure and vulnerability are the state of the system, which is basic. It's within the inherent to the system itself. And then we have the risk of impact that we're interested in. So this comes from a paper from years ago from Galopin, and also the IPCC Area 5 has evolved standing, and it changed a little bit semantics in terms of instead of adapted capacity, we're talking about a capacity response of the system. So that's basic how we define the risk. And that comes to this flower of risk of impacts. And apologies, we have some Portuguese and English on this figure. But what we're seeing here is that the risk of impact, I hope you're seeing my cursor there, the risk of impact is composed by, is a composition of the vulnerability of the system, which is the aspect that is and then we're talking about socio-ecological system. We're not talking about not only social, not only ecological system. We're talking about those two systems kind of associated, and that is prone to be affected by climate threat. And this is associated to the sensitivity of the system, which is the degree of change that that system can undergo, and the adaptive capacity, which is the degree that the elements of the system are prepared for a possible climate impact. So those are elements, important elements to define what is the vulnerability of the system. We can have several examples of that. When we go to exposure, is also the level, the duration, or the extent in which this system is subject to that specific climate threat. So we can give a very simple example. If you have some houses built in a mountain, for instance, so you have, or close to a specific river, and then if you have a extreme rain event, the houses that are close to the river, they are exposed to the change in the river flow. The degrees of the adaptive capacity and the degrees of vulnerability of that system depends a lot how the change in the river flow affect that specific house. So those are, it's a simple example, but that's how, in a way, this gets together. And then we have the climate threat to the other side. And the climate threat, I just mentioned one, is extreme rain event, for instance, or it can be a long-term drought event. So those are basic climate threat that we're talking about. Move here. Okay, so, and then how we're looking to the projection of this. So as we know, we have a lot of the effort done by the climate community, the global climate community, and also in our region, the climate community works a lot to understand how the changes in our planet affect the climate throughout the next 30, 40, 50, 100 years. So that's the future climate variability. What we're doing in this work, we're looking to the current climate variability and the current variability exposure to this specific climate. And then we have what's called the current impact risk. When we look into future climate variability, what we're doing in the platform at this point right now, which is very important, is that we're looking to the current variability and exposure condition, and then we project the climate. So we have a future impact risk under the current exposure and vulnerability. And that's very important because we are not projecting at this platform social economic variables. We might do this in the future. So the socioeconomic scenarios in the future, we're not considering at the platform at this point, but we're considering the future climate, the projection of the future climate in the globe. So that's basic. And then we decide, so we define some strategic and priority sector to work in the platform. So we're at this stage, we're amplifying this. So this is a work in construction. So we have the priority sector that we have is water, food, and energy. And what we're looking to is this sector. We're looking at the vulnerability of the water sector, the vulnerability and the adaptive capacity, all the whole vulnerability aspect of the water, food, and energy. We're looking into the exposure of these sectors as well. And to do that, we're using indicators to define what is the vulnerability level, what is the exposure level. And water, we're using 27 different indicators. For food, we're using 35 different indicators. And for energy, we're using 23 different indicators. So in total, we're basically using almost 100 indicators to look to the vulnerability of these three different sectors at those different geographical cuts that I talked before, but I'm going to show you a little in a moment. So this defines the vulnerability and exposure, and then we have the climate variability. The climate variability, we use 4 indicators for drought, and we use 4 indicators for rain, for precipitation. And we have the projection. So the climate change is associated to the projection of these indicators into future using the CMIP5 models, which is, and the RCP scenarios. For the ones that are not used to that, those are climate scenarios that were used by IPCC. And those define, in our case, we use 2 different scenarios, as I mentioned. One is a more pessimistic, where we have a level of global warming higher, and one which is more optimistic, a scenario which has a level of global warming lower, so more towards the Paris Agreement. And then we're looking to 2 time slices, 2030 and 2050. So that's basic how the platform is working today. And what are the phases associated to the definition of indicator? As you saw in the previous slides, indicators are the key elements for that, because those are the metrics that we define the vulnerability. Those are the metrics that we compare different regions and different and the sectors in different regions and within a region itself. So the indicators are really critical in this perspective. So we go from the first step, a theoretical framework, what we're talking about. So this is based on a work by the OECD, by Nardo et al., which is a handbook on constructing the composite indicator. So it is not a simple indicator, it's an indicator that is composite. So we go from a theoretical framework to a data selection, and then we go until the visualization of that specific indicator. And part of that, which is a very important aspect, is that we use expert elicitation to judge the weight, to select the data, and to judge the weight of the specific indicator. So we're going to talk today about the semi-arid region in Brazil. We need to talk to the people that know all the elements that define a critical points to be considered on weighting a specific indicator, to selecting a specific indicator on water. So on what is the risk to water availability, what are the risks to food production, to energy distribution. So we need that sort of a validation by local experts. And always with a very, with this element of always being associated to the scientific information. And how we do how this composition of indicators, how do they build up? Apologies, this again in Portuguese, but I'll try to go through the words here. So we have the level 6 down there is what we call the raw data. The raw data, they are used to form indicators, and then the indicators are used to form composite indicators. So if we can give an example like the IDH, the IDH is composed by several indicators, and the IDH it's a composite indicators. It's not a single indicator. So, and then we have this level of different characterization, normalization, ponderation, weighting, not ponderation, weighting of the indicator. And then we got a specific composite indicator that defines the sensibility and defines the capacity, adaptive capacity. The same way we do with the exposition, and the same way we do with the climate threat. We don't have composite indicators on climate threat because, it's a drought. It's a drought of a certain level. It's a red A indicator. Rain of certain level is a red A indicator. So that define index. In what it's saying here is an index of drought, and that's it's a climate threat. And that climate threat it affects the water security. So this is how we get to a specific point in our platform. And to give an example, apologies, is not in Portuguese, but not looking to the words. I wouldn't expect you to read this anyhow, even if you can read in Portuguese, because it's so many things. But the idea here is to show you how this is being used. So we're coming from the level 5 there. We don't have the raw data in this table, but we're coming from, for example, here on impacts of energy as well. So I try to blend a little bit energy, water, and food, so you can feel a little bit how the different elements we're working in the platform. So if you have here one example, which is highlighting red here, is that renewable and clean energy, and also the diversification of the generation of electricity. So you produce electricity by different source. That takes you to a specific level of opportunity, of the, let's say, level of the risk of that energy being able to be used by people or by the economy or by society. And that defines an index of sensibility, which is also related to access and people access to electricity, the level of consumption. That defines this index of sensibility, which with the capacity, the adaptive capacity, which is, what is the economic power of that specific population to access the energy, to produce energy, and what is the managing against disaster, for instance, like atmospheric electricity discharge, things like that. So that defines also the capacity, the adaptive capacity of that specific community, which is composed to the index of vulnerability and then gets to the impact of climate change to the energy security. Just to give more detailed example on how we build those indicators. So, and then we started all this platform. Our work started with the semi-arid region in Brazil. And because of several particularities, it's a very vulnerable region, especially to the high variation on climate variable on the climate, and also on availability of water. So it's a very dense populated region. We have basic 30 million inhabitants living in that part of Brazil. And it is composed by 1,262 municipalities. So it's dense populated with a lot of municipalities on it, distributed. So with different local managers, different local policies, and thus forth. As we see here, 60% of these municipalities has IDH ranging from very low to low, which is basic, more than 9 million inhabitants living in this condition. And 38% of the population, which is fairly those 9 million inhabitants, lives in the countryside. And the countryside, due to access of natural resource, due to the variability of the climate and the dependence of the rain for food production, for instance, like the rain-fed family farming, and thus far the wood extractives. So they are most vulnerable. So that's about almost 40% of the population is very vulnerable in that region. So that's the first region we decide to work on. And if you look to this map, that's where it is located in Brazil. There's a parallel to some similar regions in northern Argentina, western Paraguay, and southeastern Bolivia there, which by the climate definition by Köppen, it is a semi-arid region as well. If we look to the Brazilian one here, we see this orange a little bit lighter here. It's where is the climate semi-arid, but we also, there's an institutionalization of the semi-arid region, which included several other municipalities. So the whole region, it goes from this brown into this more of an orange color there. So that's the whole semi-arid that we are looking at. And that's, it gets almost to 1 million square kilometers. So it's a fairly large region. And because of that, because of the climate definition of the semi-arid, plus the institution definition of the semi-arid, we have a variation of the precipitation that, that goes from 200 to 800 millimeters per year. So it's pretty broad, but there's a very common feature in terms of climate there, which is the precipitation is very concentrated in one specific season. So there's this fluctuation, which is this concentration that is very important. Very recent, there was a very strong drought from 2012 to 2015. There was it was the most critical since 2011 in terms of length, in terms of intensity of the drought. So so the region needs for sure to be prepared for eventually more of strong droughts like this one. So it's important to say that in some level, almost more than 50% of the region has been disturbed or perturbed by human activities. And very, very little of the area, only 1% of the area is under conservation or preserved units. Okay, so that's basic how the platform was thought about, was built, the motivation, and where we are now. What I'm going to try to do now is to take you to navigate the platform. So that's the website here. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to move to a web page, to the web page platform, and do a little navigation on it, so you can see a little bit how it works and how we're building this functionality. So I'm just going to move very quick here. There we go. So so that's the same screen that we just saw in the PowerPoint. And so there's one issue: the platform is only in Portuguese, and that's mainly because it's meant for local decision makers or local practitioners. But we never know in the future how this is going to move, or how opportunities we can have with this platform to expand or to collaborate with other countries in the region. So when you access the platform here, so you have that basic, that print screen that I showed before. And if we go, for instance, to, so we have 1,262 municipalities, as I mentioned. The region is a semi-arid region. So that's the territory, so we can semi-arid. So if we go to the food security and we say, okay, what is the impacts for food production to the drought? So that's what shows for us every municipality in the region. It has a little scale that goes from very low to very high risk of impact to the food production by drought. So we see that most of the region, it's mean risk, and in some places we have a high risk of impact on food production by drought. So if you say, okay, so what is the vulnerability? So how this is being, how did we get to this specific result analysis? So if you go to the vulnerability, you say, oh, well, the vulnerability show us what is the region, how much is vulnerable to the drought. And then we have municipality by municipality. We can get any one here. We can click on this one here and say, okay, so then that municipality comes up there, and we have the distribution of all the indicators that define that as a high vulnerability to drought. So what is the influential factor or the determinant factor associated to that? For instance, the program that has cistern in the system. If you need to know a little bit, what is this? So this is basically contributing to almost 60% of the index. So if you want to know a little bit more of that specific factor, you click here, and there is this little box that comes in and defines what we're talking about, what kind of a national program is associated to the collecting of rainwater, and where this data came from. So it's not one important aspect. It's not a data platform. You cannot access the raw data that were used for constructing the indicator, but you can access, but you know where it came from. So then it goes. We can browse around here for a long time. So what is the adapt capacity of the whole region? And then we still are looking to this municipality here that we just picked by chance, and then we have some problems associated to the social access to finance, to the water itself. So that becomes a high vulnerable municipality. And then we can go back. And then we can just go around the platform for looking for drought, looking for, and then for the decision maker of this specific municipality that we look at, we say, okay, so the impact for the drought is considered mean, despite the fact that the exposure is really high, is because the vulnerability is not that bad, and the climate perturbation is mean as well. So that's what makes, and that's is on the present. If we go to 2050, we see that the climate condition really, the climate perturbation is worsening in that region, and then you have a higher index of impacts for the drought. So what you need to do in terms of local manager to deal with this problem? So you're going to have in the future a higher risk for your population. Okay, so if we close here, you have the option to download this map. Now you have the option to have different maps there. You can have graphs in terms of that's the level of impact for drought for every 1,262 municipalities of the semi-arid in Brazil. So you go municipality by municipality, and this is all open, is open access. Anyone can take a look and browse around. So I'm not going to take, oops, sorry. So you can do the same thing with the energy security, water security, and thus forth. If we go to the platform and you say, okay, I need to know a little bit more about how those, what is the methodology of this? So the whole methodology that I briefly described for you on my presentation, it's here. I'm using even the same graph, so it's consistent to what is on the platform. So all it is here, all the methodology for the system, let's say the partner institution are here, the source of data, who all the institutions that are providing data, and you can go one by clicking on the institution, takes you to there, and then go for the team and everyone. So that's the platform allow you to navigate all that, and that's the pilot platform. It was launched last year, end of the year, and but we consider it's still part of Brazil. So we're working to have this in for the whole country. So I'm gonna come back here to my PowerPoint. And then I'm going to show you. So this is we just saw that. So what I did here, I took some print of the screen. So you see, you can, those were all downloaded from the page. And what we're doing, and this is the work in ongoing at this point. Brazil has more than 5,000 municipalities. And then we're gonna work. We're doing the same work for all municipalities in the country to deal with water, food, and energy at this point. But we're also expanding to other let's say important features of the country for society, like hearing roads. What is the risk for the climate? The impact of climate for major roads in Brazil. We're looking for ports as well. So the climate prediction says that the ocean is rising. And then what is the impact for the port infrastructure in the country? We're looking to that. There's an important transport on by river of commodities and other products being transported by river. If you have a very low flow in the river, you might impact dramatically this sort of transport. So we're looking to that as well. So the platform is growing, is looking to different aspects. We're probably very soon we're incorporating some cities as well. So we're going to have a very fine resolution in terms of a spatial resolution to define those indicators. So you got to sit like São Paulo, Santiago, Buenos Aires, Asunción, and we go like mega cities. You have a very heterogeneous distribution of how society it's the opportunities, the inequalities, and all that in those big cities are very clear. And then we're trying to look to the cities as well in that perspective. So I think that, and that's not a work that you do alone. It's so we have a big team working here with us in terms of from MIMPI, from RNP, from the other partners, from Semadem, Copy, Fiocruz, Antac, JZ, all that working together. We do have those workshops with experts, as we're seeing here in the bottom to the left, was a workshop to validate the indicators or to discuss important data source and so forth. All the thinking, the initial think since April 2018, the initial think to what we call design sprint of the platform that was conducted by the RNP. So all this is a very, very, very strong group teamwork. And this is acknowledging to all the partners and data providers. As I mentioned, as I showed in the platform directly, so there's a huge amount of very important contributors from data itself, the broad data, to the development of indicators as well. So this is we're seeing this as a very broad and collaborative effort and initiative. So with that, I'm glad to take any questions. Thank you very much. Obrigado, muchas gracias. And that's my email down there, and the link for the platform as well. Thank you very much. Obrigado. Gracias. Bye-bye.